So thank you everyone for joining us today. A tiny bit of housekeeping. If you do have any we'll have a Q&A session at the end, so time for Q&A. But if you have questions as we go along, please pop them in the Q&A box and I'll answer them when we get to the end of the session. Ask anything you like, if it's to do with what I'm talking about, anything else relevant to Touch Day, just anything that comes to mind. Excuse me, recovering from a cold. And we'll go from there. So yes, don't use the chat box, use the Q&A. We'll have time to go through questions at the end, and we'll go from there. I won't be monitoring the Q&A box while I'm speaking, so I'm not ignoring you. I'll check it all at the end. But saying that, so we'll crack on. So thank you everyone for joining today. I'm Emma, as I've already said, and today we're talking about guest communication and how you can make that easy with Touch Day. And this is really to talk about guest communication as a whole, what communication is, why it's so important, and then the different ways Touch Day can help you communicate with your guests and build a relationship with your guests. So we'll jump right in. So what we'll cover, so why communication is important, how Memo, and Memo is a feature that's available through Touch Day, how that can help. We'll talk about the two different ways you can use Memo. So the classic Memo, which is your guest notifications, your guest communication journey, and then the new two-way messaging feature, which is brand new and really nifty, and I'll go into more of the details on that. We'll talk about Memo and upsells, so how you can use Memo to surface upsells to your guests and use your guidebooks to really get those upsells in front of your guests at the right time. A couple of actions that you can take today, so some practical things you can start doing from today to start improving your communication with guests. And then Q&A time, so I'll be able to answer your questions. So off we go. So why is guest communication important? So often people say to me, why do I have to speak to my guests? My guests are just, they've made the booking, they're arriving at the property. If there's an issue, they'll get in touch, but otherwise it's fine. But it isn't. So why is this guest communication important? So the communication that you have with your guests dictates the quality of the experience that they have when they stay with you. So you can't just leave your guests alone once they've made that booking and hope for the best. And why do we know this? Well, we did a survey, I think about 2 years ago now, and this survey surveyed guests all over the world, more than 1,000 guests, and we asked them about communication, how they liked to be communicated with before, during, and after their stay. And here are some of the key stats that really stood out to me, and these, really back up why it's important to have a guidebook and why it's important to communicate with your guests and make that a key focus of your business. So more than a fifth of guests were missing information during their stay. Missing information about the property, about amenities, what they could and couldn't do, and just general questions that they need answering. So if guests are missing that information, that's already putting the guests on the back foot and not giving them a great experience, and meaning that they have to proactively reach out where it's just basic information that you could have already provided if you were communicating clearly. The next that really stood out is that 69% of guests said that communication influenced the likelihood of them leaving a positive review. So almost 70% of guests are saying that the communication they receive from a host and that feeling of hospitality and being looked after that they get, that influences the likelihood of leaving a positive review. And that positive review is what every other potential guest is going to be looking at when they're searching on Airbnb, on Booking.com, on Google, wherever they're doing their research. That's their first introduction to your business. So bad communication means bad reviews and is really going to impact how other guests are going to come and find your business. And then the other one that haunts me and should haunt hosts and property managers is that less than half of guests felt very well looked after. So less than half. So that's less than half of the people that are coming to properties are feeling like they're having a really good experience, feeling during their stay, when they're on their holiday with their friends, their family, their partners, they're not really feeling that good sense of hospitality. And that's really what people want. When you ask people in their lives, oh, remind me of a good memory from your childhood, or, in the last couple of years, a good memory. People talk about their holidays. They're going to say, think about it yourself. When was something really fun, or when I was a kid, you're going to talk about your holiday. These are memories that people are making, super important to make sure they feel looked after and that your hospitality is shining through. Not just because it makes the guests feel good, but because it means they're more likely to leave a good review. They're more likely to talk positively about your business to their friends and their network, and they're more likely to book again. And if you've really built a strong connection through that layer of communication that you've built with the guest, they're more likely to book again directly with you rather than going to an OTA. So this hopefully gives you a good understanding of why guest communication is important and why we talk about it a lot at Touch Day, and really what it can mean for your business. So beyond this piece, which is based on our research, we also know that communication is really the key to your direct booking strategy. So thinking about what's happened this year with the OTAs, especially with the online travel agencies, so with Airbnb especially, they have a tighter grip than ever on those contact details of your guests. They really see the guest as their guest, not your guest. So even if the guests are coming to stay in your homes, they're in your properties, Airbnb and the other platforms, they see it as their guest and they want to own that relationship. And they're making it harder and harder than ever for you to build that connection and have that strong communication with your guests. Email addresses are no longer available in most cases. And I think it was just about a month ago now that phone numbers are starting to be made unavailable. So it's getting harder and harder to stay in touch with guests, but it's becoming even more important. Costs are rising overall. The cost of the technology you use, the cost of just running the basic day-to-day of your business, all of these costs are rising, and that's squeezing your margin. So it's more important than ever to make sure you're getting the best return on investment for every single guest that walks through the door, comes into your properties. And finally, guests want more and more from their stays. Guests want experiences. They want something special that makes them feel really, really good. More and more guests want to have that really strong relationship with the people that they're booking with, so that they're going into their holidays with, no concerns, no worries. Their expectations are high. They feel confident and happy that they're going to have a wonderful time, because guests really want to come away not just with, oh, I went away for 5 days. They want to come away with this wonderful sense of feeling of having a really great experience. And how do you offer that to your guests? It all starts with communication. So whilst it's nice to make your guests feel nice, communication is really all about managing to get that direct line to your guests so that they become your guest and you can control that relationship going forward, not the OTAs. And so you can do everything in your power to really get the most from every guest that's coming through your door. And they have a nice time too, so it's win-win. So how can Touch Day help make all of this happen? Excuse me. So a phrase I'm going to use a little bit today is being software connected. So software connected means that you are using a PMS, a property management software provider. Maybe it's Logify, Guesty, Avantio, Hostaway, there's tons of them out there, all very, very good. And TouchDay have lots of partnerships with different PMS providers. We have about 15 or 16. You can see more about who we're connected with on our website. But if you are software connected and using a PMS, you're probably sat there thinking, Emma, you're talking about communication, but I already manage all of my communication through my PMS unified inbox. Fine. And when guests book with you, you're responding there, you're managing your communication there. Or if you're not software connected, maybe you're responding to questions directly in the Airbnb unified inbox or booking.com, whatever it is that you want to be doing. And whether you are software connected or you're not, those methods are still really important, because that's how you speak to guests once they've made that booking, or maybe even pre-booking when they have questions. So managing your communication in that way is still important, and that's not something we would suggest stopping. Today, when I'm talking about Memo, it's how you supplement that communication and go beyond just the basics. And that's how Touch Day really comes in and helps. And to do that, we have our wonderful solution called Memo. So Memo historically has all been about automating your communication with guests and helping create more of a connection with your guests. And classically, it's always been about setting up your guest communication flow really from that post-booking moment. So the guest makes their booking. You get your guidebook link sent out to the guest, whether directly from TouchStay or you've got it automated through one of our integrations with your PMS provider, and you're able to breadcrumb different types of communication throughout the booking window, then once the guest has arrived, and then once they've left. So this is all about automating your communication flow with guests and getting key information to them about their stay. That's classic Memo. And what we've done this year is we've launched what we're calling two-way messaging with Memo, which is how you can chat directly with your guests from inside the guidebook. So I'll go into that in a bit more detail now and explain really what the two differences are, but that's the newest thing that we've launched this year. So classic Memo, as I said, it's all about scheduling, setting up a schedule of messages, emails, and SMS, and automating your communication with guests. So once they've made that booking, that whole communication flow that goes throughout the guest journey, that's all set up. You can kind of set it, forget it, use the settings within TouchStay to personalize those messages with the guest name, the number of people that are coming in the booking, you know, that kind of thing. So guests feel nicely taken care of. They feel like they're getting information from you, but you've just kind of set it up and it's nice and automatic and very easy for you to handle and scale no matter how many guests are coming to the properties that you're looking after. It's also a great way of tracking usage at booking level, so understanding for the guests that are coming to your properties when they're accessing your guidebook. So we have trackable links. So when you send out the guidebook link to the guest, whether that's through a memo message or through one of the integrations that we have with the PMS providers or our Airbnb integration, actually, we have one with them as well, you're able to track if those guidebook links are opened and see other activity that guests are taking within the guide as well. So you can understand, is the guest actually receiving and reading, are they receiving the information I'm sending? Are they opening and engaging with the information that I'm sending? And if they're not, okay, what actions do I take to make sure that they do? So Memo really is a fantastic way of getting the guidebook link into your guests' hands, because that's the first way that you really start building that connection with them post-booking. So that's classic Memo. Schedule, automate, personalize, set it and forget it messaging, and surface all the best parts of your guidebook to the guest. That's really what it's all about. So what is new? So in the age of OTA domination, when Airbnb and Booking.com and the others are kind of taking over and making it even harder to build these relationships with guests, this is your new little superpower and secret weapon to getting that direct communication with your guests. So this is basically guest chat built directly into your guidebook. So when you have this turned on, when the guest opens up their guidebook on the front page of that guide, we have a couple of tabs along the bottom, and one of those tabs will say chat. The guest can click that and write a question to you. So just like any classic messaging platform that you would use. And the best thing about this is it's not compliant, it's compliant. That's the word I was going for there. So this is a compliant direct line into your guests. What do I mean by compliant? Well, this year, Airbnb put a lot of rules in place that make it even trickier to communicate with guests, especially if it's outside the Airbnb platform. We went through this in a recent webinar, so if you aren't familiar with that and you want to understand more about those rules and restrictions and how to remain compliant, go to our YouTube channel and search through some of our old webinars, and you'll be able to see there what has changed. We've got some cheat sheets and really nice things for how to stay compliant. But essentially, you're not allowed to, in a nutshell, you're not allowed to request communication information from the guest. You can't ask them for their phone number, for example, but the guest can reach out to you. So this is really making it super easy for the guest to directly reach out to you, and they don't have to write out their phone number for you to have. The minute the guest initiates a chat with you, that phone number that the guest is using is pulled into TouchStay and a record is taken of that. So this is like stealth phone number collection. So even if you don't listen to anything else that I've said today, this is a fantastic way of capturing the guest's email address, staying compliant with Airbnb, and kind of automating this process. These phone numbers are just collected nice and easily for you. The next thing that's really cool about this is it's a central inbox for all active guest messages. So I'm a guest, I've booked on Airbnb, I've been messaging you back and forth. I have lots of questions because I'm a very type A kind of guest and I want to know everything. I get to your property and I have to go back into Airbnb because I have a question. Oh, which message is that in? And I'm kind of lost as a guest. As a guest, it's not the best experience using the Airbnb inbox, at least in the experience that I've had. And a lot of guests report this too. So what this does, instead of the guest having to go into booking.com or somewhere else or dig through their emails to get in touch with you, they have an instant direct line of communication with you from the link you've already sent them, the app that's already on your phone. So when you send the guidebook link to the guest, once they've made the booking, they're able to have the guide on their phone from then onwards. It always lives there. And so they can just open that up, and the first thing they'll see is that they can chat with you. They don't have to search for a phone number. They don't have to find an email address. They don't have to go to 4 different platforms. It's just directly there in the guide. So when the guest is planning their trip, thinking about what they want ahead of the time that they're there, or when they're actually already at your property, they have this direct line of communication with you within the guide that's already full of information and the stuff that they need to know. So it's just a really easy, frictionless way for guests to get in touch with you. And it's also fantastic because when a guest is in your property or when they're due to arrive and they're thinking about their trip and they want to book something, plan something, you're able to get in touch with that guest or let them get in touch with you when their intent is high. So what do I mean by intent? It could be intent to book an excursion, intent to rent some equipment from you, intent to arrange, I don't know, a personal chef, someone to come and cook dinner one of the nights, a booking for a local restaurant. When guests are using a touch stay guide, they are actively thinking about their stay, whether before or during, and they're able, when they think, oh, I wonder if we could book this, you're able to capture that intent because the guest can ask you a question right away. They're not going to go off, do the washing up and, kind of forget what they were thinking of. So again, it's frictionless, making it much easier to capture that intent, especially when it comes to upsells. So this is why we've launched this two-way messaging, this guest chat built into the guide, to kind of really help you in a stealth way capture those phone numbers from the guests and have that lovely active communication with the guests while they're at your property. And there's a central inbox that you'll be able to access from your TouchStay account. So when you log in, you'll be able to see all of the messages that you're receiving from active guests. You're able to set an out of office. So if you're not available during certain hours, you can just have an out of office on, so guests will still get a response or know another number to contact you on. So it's a really nice way, not just for kind of those automated messages after booking, but really those things where guests need an answer and they need them now. And you can be very proactive there. So this feature is in beta mode right now, so it's not fully available to everyone, but we are rolling that out. So what's available right now is for folks in the US, just in the US right now, if you want this turned on, you can send an email to support@touchstay.com, and this can be enabled in your account. And then going forward, we're going to automate that process, but that's where we are just for now. From Q1, so the start of next year, this will be rolling out to Canada and then rolling out to Europe. And with Europe, there'll be an integration with WhatsApp as well. So there'll be even more functionality when it comes to Europe, because everyone in Europe is using WhatsApp. We all love WhatsApp. So if you're not in the US, put this in your planning for the first quarter of the year. And I'm going to pop in the chat, the Q&A box at the end, a link that you can click on if you're interested. And we'll reach out to you if you want us to reach out to you when this becomes available, so that as soon as it's there, you'll get an email from us and you can turn this on in your account. So right now, if you're in the US, send us an email. Just to support@touchstay.com, and we can help you get this set up. It takes a couple of days, but we're going to automate that process going forward. So that's what we have available right now. So what else? So you're probably thinking, and Emma, you've talked a lot about, I'm already software connected, I'm using a PMS. Do I really need this? How does this really help with my business? So this is still a really super guest engagement solution, even if you are software connected. So even if you're using a PMS. So, excuse me. So as I've said before, to recap, this is a compliant direct way of managing communication with your guests. So you're allowed to go outside the Airbnb inbox. You're able to have that communication and chat functionality with guests and still remain compliant with Airbnb's policies and policies of the other OTAs that are getting stricter all the time. It's a super easy method for guests to reach out to you. As I've said, you can collect their phone numbers, you can capture that high intent. When guests need something, they don't have to wait to the next morning or wait hours for a response. They can just send you a chat. It's easy for them. It's removing that friction. And one of the greatest things about this feature is it gives you more of a chance to upsell and offer more experiences to your guests. And as I said earlier, guests want experience. They want these experiences. They want to feel special and have these great moments when they're on their holidays. And happy guests means more revenue for you. So let's run through why that is. So with Memo, historically, when you set up that messaging journey for your guests from booking, when they arrive and when they leave, you can surface different parts of your guidebook to the guest depending on where they are in that journey. So if they're one day before check-in, you can send them a memo message that they receive on their phone or to their email that explains how that they check in. They don't have to go back into Airbnb or booking.com or whatever email they've received. The check-in information is right there on their phone, easy for them to access. So that cuts down phone calls to you and to your team and queries and messages all over the shop. You've just surfaced that information right to the guest, and you can use Memo to do that. So you can use Memo to pick up links from the different sections of your guide, pop that into a memo message, whether that's an email or a text message, and send that off to the guest at the moment that is right for them. So this is great for, as I said, check-in and check-out, seasonal messages. For example, if you live somewhere where it gets snowy or somewhere where it gets super hot, if there's special information that you need to share with guests about the property based on extreme temperatures, or maybe it's around Christmas and you want to let them know about something Christmassy, if they want to order a Christmas tree to the property, for example, you can send a notification to them using Memo to let them know that information. So it's great for surfacing specific content. And it's great for gathering guest feedback as well. There's a little feedback widget that you can add to your guide where guests can give you a star rating and add any comments. It's also super useful for friendlier upsells. So what do I mean by friendly upsells? So with the Touch Stay guidebook, you are able to have a section within your guide where you can offer upsells. So whether that be if you're charging guests for early check-in or late checkout, if you're offering them a breakfast basket, for example, or a lot of our customers in the past have offered a charcuterie board or different equipment rental, whatever it is that you're upselling to your guests, you can set up a section within your guidebook. So the guest, once, when they're going through their guide, discovering about the property, they can see everything that you have available on offer for them, and they're able to decide whichever ones they want to add to their trip, and they can add them to their trip directly in your guide, which is fantastic. It's not available quite yet to take payment through the guide, but that's coming very, very soon. It may already have happened. So anyone from TouchStay, feel free to correct me if that's already happened. I think it may have happened. But essentially, the guest no longer has to ask you a question if they want to purchase something. They don't have to go off to another platform. All of the upsells, experiences, different products and services that you want to offer to your guests, you can do it directly within the guide. I think you can take that payment directly within the guide and have that arranged for the guest when they arrive. So this is a great way of, so how do you use Memo to do this? So you can take the upsell section that you have within your guidebook, add that as a link into a memo message, send that memo message to the guest. It's great to send that post-booking because that intent is high at that moment, or just before they arrive because intent is high then as well, or even during the stay, so that guests can just click that link, see what's available, make the purchase, friction-free. So using Memo and dropping your upsell links from your guidebook and just getting that notification sent out to the guest at the right time is going to increase the opportunity of you being able to upsell to them. And it's also doing it in a very non-intrusive way. You're not calling them up. You're not sending them a ton of emails. You're just sending them a little link to the guidebook that they're already looking, that they've already accessed. So it's a really friendly, nice, comfortable way to offer upsells to them that isn't like aggressive selling. So this Touch Day, I've had upsells for, we've been doing this for this year, being able to offer this directly within the guide. So it's a great pairing to get Memo and upsells working together. Lovely. How are we doing for time? All fine, lovely. And Memo is a feature that TouchStay customers have been using for many years. And when we launched Memo, gosh, it must be 5 years ago or more by now, probably a lot longer. When Memo was launched, the core reason it was created as a feature was really to cut down on guest questions. So I keep talking about that guest communication journey from booking, pre-arrival, arrival, when they're during their stay, and then post stay once they've left. And because there are different moments when you want to, well, there's different moments when guests are going to have different questions. Day before they're arriving, they're going to have questions about check-in. During their stay, they might have questions about how many towels, can they get extra towels, for example. After they've made a booking, they might have a question about the beds and how they're set up. Lots of questions that guests have. You know your business, you know the types of questions that you get very frequently from guests. So the reason we really launched Memo was to proactively anticipate the questions that guests are going to have and answer them before they ask them. So by having this kind of flow of messages set up throughout the guest journey, a combination of emails and SMS text messages, you're able to preempt those guest questions and answer them before they arrive. So it's all about cutting down on those questions, less admin for your teams, less time spent on the phone, and having to manage, lots of different communication with guests. It's all about streamlining that and making it really easy. And just offering a really nice experience to your guests. People want to feel like they're being reached out to. They don't want to be hammered with hundreds of messages, of course, but they want to know, especially if they've got a long booking window, you want to keep that anticipation going. You want to help the guests kind of whet their appetite before they arrive and show that you're there for them. So they feel confident, you feel confident as a host, and it's a win-win for everyone. So that's really why Memo came along in the first place. So if you haven't used it before and you're a TouchStay customer, log into your account, have a look around and get it set up, test a couple of messages, start using it with guests that have got reservations already. You can set it up with whether you've got a PMS or not, and it's just a great way of really taking some of the hard work out of guest comms. So a couple of steps that you can take from today to make your lives a bit easier and enhance some of your guest communications. So number one, it's that stealth contact collection with no effort on your part. So that's what the two-way messaging and the guest chat is all about. So request to turn on two-way messaging so guests can get in touch with you. So any guest that sends you a message when they reach out first, you're going to get that phone number. And then you can use that phone number because they've offered it to you freely, no coercion. You're able to remarket to that guest, stay in touch with that guest, and hopefully build a direct relationship with them that goes beyond just their first booking. I highly recommend, if you're not using Memo, then you should be. But if you are using Memo, and if you're not doing this already, add an upsell message into your pre-arrival comms flow. So think about, based on the types of guests that you have coming to your properties, when they typically ask, is this available? Can I rent this? Do you offer this, etc.? Think about when they ask for that during the booking window and add a Memo message around that time to your messaging flow and kind of preempt the question about guests asking about upsells and see how many purchases you get. And if you haven't got upsells set up in your guide, I highly recommend you do that as well. If you want to learn how to get that set up, it's super simple. You can go to our help center, and there's articles on how to do that, or you can again go to our YouTube channel, look at the last couple of webinars, and you'll see in there one all about upsells and how to get that set up. And then finally, add a message to your guest communication flow that answers your most frequently asked questions. So you can cut down on the admin. So the most frequently asked questions across the board are, what's the Wi-Fi password? Of course. And how do I check in and how do I check out? Those three questions are the ones that almost every guest will want to ask. So if you probably sent that information to them when they made the booking, they haven't read it or they can't find that email. But if you send a notification to them through Memo, especially if it's a text message, especially if it's with the Wi-Fi code and how to check in, they've got that there on their phone. No digging through inboxes or different apps. It's right there and they've got that information available. as soon as they're ready to check in. So you're already anticipating the guest's needs and meeting those expectations, and you're cutting down on them reaching out with these questions. So those are 3 things that you can do very simply to start improving your guest communication today or tomorrow, depending on what time zone you're joining us from. So there we are, me speaking very fast as usual and trying to answer all of your questions. So I'm going to just stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to jump to the Q&A box because we've had a few questions. So I'm going to take a sip of my coffee if you don't mind. Oh, much better. Lovely. So I'm looking at the questions that we have. Lovely. So there's a question from Mary that says, we hear that Airbnb will suspend hosts if they find anything that indicates host is trying to get guest information, even if it is in the house, business cards, QR codes. So for things that are available in a house, I mean, unless Airbnb are going to come around to your house and do a sweep for the QR codes, I mean, I've definitely heard stories of this that people are anticipating might happen. I've not heard a story of it actually happening, but of course, the most important thing is to remain compliant. And we would never make any recommendations to anyone to do something that isn't compliant. If you go to the previous webinar I did a couple of weeks ago with Mark Simpson from Boostly, we actually talked a lot about this. We looked at the very specific rules. We gave you a cheat sheet on what you can and can't communicate about, because there are a lot of rules. And based on the wording of those rules, some things you absolutely cannot do and some things you absolutely can. So make sure you're being compliant, but make sure you are absolutely using the communication channels that are still open to you. So the main reason why you can still use a Touch Stay guidebook and share information with your guests is because it's sharing information that's necessary for the guest's stay. You're not telling the guest to leave Airbnb. You're not pulling them away from that. You can even use Airbnb. We have an integration with Airbnb to share the guidebook links with the guest. So if you're sharing information about the property that's pertinent to the guest's stay, you're still allowed to share that. So one of the main rules that Airbnb changed with their communication is you're not proactively allowed to ask the guest for their email address and their phone number, but they are allowed to offer it to you voluntarily. They're absolutely allowed to do that. And of course, you know, if the guest has an emergency, they have to get in touch with you and they have to be able to get in touch with you. And that's not what Airbnb is trying to do away with. So I really recommend, because it's too much to go through now, but if you go to our previous webinar, and I think on our LinkedIn as well, we had these nice little cheat sheets up about how you can and can't communicate, that goes into that in a lot more detail, because yes, there are things people are doing that are very creative to get around these rules, but really, we're really focused on just remaining compliant. So I hope that kind of answers your question, Mary. Do feel free to go look at the previous webinar. It was 2 weeks ago. It was with Mark Simpson from Boostly, and we went into all of this in a lot of detail. I hope that's helpful. Lovely. Is there a way to capture a guest email through the messaging system that is considered compliant? So this is a tricky one. You automatically get the guest's phone number, of course, when they send you a message, but unless they offer you their email address, you're not allowed to take it from them. Excuse me, unless it's, of course, it's for local compliance. So legally, in Spain, for example, you have to take the guest's contact details and submit those because it's just part of the laws in Spain, the tourism laws. So it depends which country you're in. But for example, if the guest wants to make certain bookings that require an email address, if they want to book a car rental or a bicycle rental, because you have bicycles on your property, you might need to ask, or if they're booking with a restaurant and you're taking that booking for them and managing it with the local restaurant, you might need to ask for their email address. And that's kind of in that gray area of is it or isn't it allowed. Again, go back to our previous webinar where we go into that in a lot more detail. But right now, the messaging system just captures the phone numbers, not email addresses, I'm afraid. Lovely. Question from Andy. If upsell shop payments are taken through Touch Day, is there a commission? No, there is no commission taken by Touch Day. It's your money. It's your upsells. We just have the payment gateway built into the guide, so the guest doesn't have to go anywhere else to make that purchase. There's no commission taken by Touch Day. It's all yours, Andy, I promise. Lovely. And then just a nice question from Joan, or a nice comment from Joan. Not a question, but thank you. I hope that's answered some of the questions that have come up. The theme around communication and what you can and can't do when it comes to speaking with guests has become a lot muddier since a lot of the Airbnb rules have changed. And it's always our goal to make sure you can stay compliant. So the last 2 webinars we did really focused on that topic. So definitely go back, look at those. Screen grab those cheat sheets, print them off or have them on your phone, whatever, just to make sure, and then look at all of your communication and check where you are being or maybe aren't being compliant, and make sure everything's watertight, because no one wants to get restricted on Airbnb. That's definitely not the goal. Another question here from John. He says, I typically use the SMS memo feature to send guidebooks to guests post-booking. Excellent. In some cases, the guide gets blocked or goes to guest spam, so they never receive it. This is due to the general phone number that TouchStay uses. Is there a way to improve this? That's a really good question, John. I'm not certain, and I haven't heard of that happening before. But I will pass this on to our product team straight after, and get an answer to you. John, if you'd like to pop your email address in here, I am allowed to ask you for that one. If you wouldn't mind popping your email address in here, I'll get back to you with the answer to that one, because I'm not 100% certain why some messages would or wouldn't be going into spam. That's all I can say for that one. So yeah, John, pop me your email address in the Q&A box if you don't mind sharing, and I'll get an answer to you. Lovely. Super. And then I'm just going to share my screen again because we have 2 last little bits for you. Oh, here we are. So, here we are. Lovely. So thank you everyone for coming. It's been a really lovely conversation, and hopefully this has been useful, and has given you some things to think about. And even if you're not using TouchStay, all of these things around the importance of guest communication, it's all still really, really important for your business. So think about what you can do to enhance the guest experience through the communication channels that you're using right now, because it all helps. It all helps guests feel good, hopefully leave a good review, and keep coming back. So the 2 things we have for you here, the QR code on the left, this is a link to our 2025 Host Insights report. So we are doing, like we did with our guest communication study, we're doing a Host Insights report that I think will be coming out towards the end of this year, or perhaps even into early next year. So if you have a question that you want answered about what the world of hosting is like, or even if you're just curious to see the questions that we're asking, scan this QR code and take a look there, and let us know what kind of questions you'd like to have some data on. And then if you're brand new to TouchStay, you don't have a TouchStay guidebook, so this is just for you newbies who've snuck in here today, we have an AI guidebook generator tool that we launched this year. So if you scan this QR code, it takes you to that page. All you have to do is take your Airbnb listing page, the link to your listing page, drop it into this web page that you get through the QR code, and it will take you through our guidebook generator that can get you set up with a basic guidebook in 60 seconds. So it takes all that great information you've already put into your Airbnb listing, photos, information about your business, information about the property. It pulls it all in and organizes it directly in a TouchStay guidebook. So if you're brand new and you want to see what it all looks like, this is the fastest way to get up and start playing around with TouchStay. So highly recommend you give it a go. I'm just looking in the chat box one last time to see if there's anything else that's come up. No, that's it. So thank you everyone. Really appreciate you all joining today. I hope this has been useful, and see you on the next webinar in a couple of weeks. Wherever you are in the world, have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you. Bye.